It is Graham here, living the dream in October 2021 at the fantastic Sandals Grand Antigua. This is the last video in our Antigua 21 adventure series, because this is the video where I try to stitch the component parts of the entire series into one full motion length picture. Our awesome friends Donna and Michael, who joined us for the second week of this vacation, love these videos, so this one is for you guys. Before I get into our Antigua 21 adventure, there are a couple of things I'd like to say. First of all, as I've edited this entire video series, I am absolutely aware that it is not as good as the video series I made last year with our trip to the Sandals Grand St. Lucia in October 2020. Fiona and I had one priority for our trip to Antigua in October 21, and that was to relax, to get some sun, enjoy some food and drink, and do very little else other than relax. The challenge with chilling out and relaxing means I don't have a lot of video content to share with you. So I've done my best, guys, to share with you, or should I say diarise, our trip to Antigua. And it's not as good as I'd like it to be, and I'm really sorry. I've done my best, and I hope you enjoy it. Roll the video. You joined Fiona and I on day one of our Antigua 21 adventure on board a Virgin Atlantic Boeing 787-9 Dreamliner from London Heathrow to Antigua's VC Bird International Airport. And I have done a full trip report on this journey between the UK and Antigua. Just go back to video 171 and you will be able to follow Fiona and I transiting London Heathrow Airport en route, of course, to Antigua. This was Fiona's first time on board Virgin Atlantic. Back in the 1990s, I used to fly Virgin Atlantic quite a lot between London Heathrow and Miami. And I will say that the Virgin upper class has improved massively in the last 30 years. But as I think in summing up our trip report back in video number 170, Fiona's and my preference would still be to fly British Airways through Gatwick. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now and allow you to enjoy the final approach into VC Bird International Airport here at the St. John's in Antigua. And yes, guys, I know it was a bit of a murky day. As you can see, Antigua's VC Bird International Airport is a lot more modern than you will find in St. Lucia. They have a number of jet bridges connecting the aircraft directly into the terminal. And when we arrived just after 3 p.m. on Saturday, the 2nd of October 21, there was two narrow-body jets on the ground. One was Delta from Atlanta and the other one was American Airlines from Miami. But the great news for us was that these aircraft were getting prepared to depart, so their passengers had long disembarked, meaning that our journey through the health screening process, immigration and customs was going to be fairly easy this afternoon. And on the subject of health screening, I should remind you that it is October 2021 and we are at the end, or what we hope is at the end, of the COVID-19 pandemic, and our requirements for entering Antigua meant that Fiona and I had to produce a negative COVID PCR test taken by health professionals no more than 4 days before we travelled. And from the 1st of October 2021, the Antigua authorities were requiring all passengers arriving on the island had at least one COVID vaccine injection. Fiona and I, of course, were double jabbed, and we headed down to the first checkpoint, the health screening checkpoint, with our NHS certificate proving that we were double vaccinated. As As I said on my trip report back on video 170, our arrival process in Antigua was incredibly smooth, and therefore from stepping off the aircraft to arriving here in the baggage hall took less than 30 minutes. So a massive thumbs up to the Antiguan authorities for a job well done on this arrival process. And after clearing customs, Fiona and I headed through the arrival hall in the direction of the exit doors and of course the Sandals kiosk, because unlike St. Lucia, Sandals do not have an arrival lounge here at Antigua. And unlike St. Lucia, the Sandals kiosk here is a very chaotic place. They really are struggling to deal with a wide-body jet that had just arrived from the UK with so many Sandals guests on board. But what was most frustrating for Fiona and I is Sandals didn't seem to have any record of our booking whatsoever at this stage in the process. And this is despite Fiona and I booking the full package with Sandals, including the flights and resort. But it wasn't very long until Fiona and I were on board the free minibus en route to the Sandals Grand Antigua and our 2-week vacation in October 2021. And if you want to see more information on the free transfer service between VC Bird International and the Sandals Grand Antigua, go back to video 172, where I've provided more information on this 15-minute journey between the airport and the resort. And unlike our arrival at the Sandals Grand Antigua back in 2019, we actually were met and we were provided with cold towels. But Fiona's and my blood pressure continued to rise because it was clear that Sandals were not expecting us. So despite us booking this entire vacation through Sandals, including the flights and resort, plus checking in online a few days before, Fiona and I were escorted to a comfortable seat in the lobby area to wait while Sandals sorted out their mess. But they did bring us a cocktail, so things weren't all that bad. Sandals did finally find our booking and we were escorted to room 512, where we would be spending the first 6 nights of our Antigua 21 vacation. What I probably should say now is that Fiona and I had extended our vacation from 1 week to 2 weeks about 6 months earlier, but due to availability, Sandals were unable to give us the club level walkout room that we had booked on what was now the second week of our 2-week Sandals 21 vacation. And that's why for the first 6 nights we'd basically downgraded to this room. And if you watch video number 173, our resort and room tour, you'll get an in-depth tour and review of this room 512 plus room 804, which we had for the second 8 nights. And after we'd unpacked, it was time to get another glass of something cold and watch our first sunset. Cheers. And when the sun set, it was time to head to the Drunken Duck pub for a pre-dinner glass of champagne. Due to the COVID procedures when we visited the Sandals Grand Antigua in October 21, the Drunken Duck and the Bayside were the only 2 restaurants you didn't have to book. So without a restaurant booked on our first night, Fiona and I headed back to the courtyard in the direction of the Bayside restaurant, where we had our third pre-dinner drink while we waited on the 20 minutes for our table to be ready. Cheers. I've no idea why Fiona was trying to get me to dance because she knows better. And anyway, it was time to head to the Bayside for dinner. And as an added bonus, we got a table right by the beach. And to continue the bad habits that our great friends Donna and Michael started back in 2019, we headed to Paris for dessert and coffee. And with our body clock still in UK time, I was amazed that Fiona and I got past 9:30 on our first night. And arriving back in our room, we saw that the fantastic housekeeping team at Sandals had done some of this fantastic towel art. And this is where I bring Saturday and day 1 of our Sandals 21 adventure to a close. You join Fiona and I on Sunday the 3rd of October 2021 on day 2 of our Sandals Grand Antigua adventure, which of course was our first full day at the resort. And of course, being our first day and our body clocks still stuck back in UK time, we were up way far too early for breakfast, which meant that Fiona and I had plenty of time to go for a walk on the beach. I think from memory it was around 6:45 a.m. and the restaurants didn't open until 7:30. Without a doubt, the beach at the Sandals Grand Antigua is one of the main reasons you will choose this resort. In fact, Antigua boasts the fact that they've got 365 beaches on the island, one for every day of the year. And if you're wondering what beach the Antigua people go to on a leap year, they tell me that they have the opportunity to visit their favourite beach twice. Passing one of the many bars at the Sandals Grand Antigua, I probably should tell you that the bars don't open until mid-morning. I honestly can't remember if it is 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. before they will serve alcohol. But back to Fiona and my first day at the Sandals Grand Antigua, it was time for breakfast, and that meant we were off to the bayside. And therefore you will know if you watched our last video, which was part 1 of our Antigua 21 adventure. The bayside is also where we had dinner last night. And with the restaurant being quiet, Fiona and I snagged a table by the beach just as we did last night for dinner. But this, guys, is where Fiona and I ran into our first problem, because our waitress should have explained some of the COVID procedures that were in operation. And unlike at the Sandals Grand St. Lucia last year, here at the Sandals Grand Antigua, you place your egg and omelette order with the waitress before heading to the buffet collection area to pick up things like your juices, cereal and cooked breakfast, which is all served to you. But hell mend you if you meet Liv'n, the breakfast egg chef, because here on our first morning on the resort, Fiona approached asking for an omelette, only to have the face chewed off her for daring to go against the Sandals procedures, which our waitress really should have explained to us, especially with this being our first morning on the resort. Anyway, the breakfast process was absolutely bonkers at the Sandals Grand Antigua during October 2021, leaving Fiona and I disappointed on our first full morning. Anyway, the weather was exceptional, and Fiona and I planned to do nothing else other than top up with vitamin D. As with the vast majority of the Sandals vacations Fiona and I take each year, our holiday is focused around 3 things: sun, food and drink. So at around 1 p.m. it was time for lunch and our first alcoholic drink of the day. Oh yeah, and some food, I nearly forgot about that. So we decided to go to Barefoot on the Beach, which is situated on the Mediterranean side of the resort, requiring a 5-minute walk through the incredible gardens of this extremely well manicured resort. And here we are arriving at Barefoot on the Beach, which is a fish restaurant by night with a lunchtime snack menu throughout the day. And leaving barefoot on the beach after a fantastic lunch, Fiona and I decided to head in the direction of the Paris Cafe for some coffee. After coffee at Paris, Fiona and I headed back to our poolside lounger to top up with even more vitamin D. But all too soon, our day had turned into night and we were off to the Drunken Duck for dinner. And as I said in video number 173, our resort and room tour, I've always been extremely impressed with the menu at the Drunken Duck on site here at the Sandals Grand Antigua. So Fiona and I were directed to a table by our waitress before settling down to pre-dinner drinks, followed by a pretty good dinner. And after dinner at the Drunken Duck, followed by dessert at Paris, Fiona and I finished our Sunday night at the piano bar for a nightcap. Monday the 4th of October 2021 was one of the mornings that I got up really early and left Fiona snoozing on in bed. It was a gorgeous morning and I decided to go for a walk on the beach, at the same time recording all of the introductions to these video series that I'm running as part of our Antigua 21 adventure. Monday was also the day that I recorded the room 512 room tour footage, which formed part of video number 173, our resort and room tour from the Sandals Grand Antigua. We only spent the first 6 nights of our Antigua 21 adventure in this room, moving up to a walkout club level room at the Sunset Bluff on Friday. So I think the best way to sum up this room, which is one of Sandals' lowest standard rooms at the Grand Antigua, there is no way to hide it, guys, it was tired and it was badly in need of refurbishment. But hey, it was clean except for some suspect marks in the bath. The air conditioning, TV and minibar all worked, so we really had very little to complain about. Right, getting back to our Monday morning, Fiona and I had decided to go to Mario's for breakfast, so we made the 5 to 10 minute walk across to the Mediterranean side of this resort, walking past the main Mediterranean pool en route. Unlike the Bayside for breakfast, Mario's is indoors and air conditioned. But in reality, for breakfast, it was exactly the same as the Bayside. Your waitress would organise your eggs and omelette order before you head to the buffet area where you were served your choice of breakfast. I have to admit, this was an incredibly inefficient way to do breakfast and left you guessing the optimal point between ordering your eggs and going up to the buffet. Well, the alternative, guys, your eggs or your breakfast was cold, one or the other. Right, before I get into day 2, I'm going to have a bit of a moan this morning because their system here at breakfast at the Sandals Grand Antigua absolutely sucks. If you want to order omelette or any sort of egg, you must do it via the waitress and she'll go and get it. But if you want to go and get fruit or pancakes or sausage bacon, etc., scrambled egg that's been lying out for God knows how long, you can go up to the buffet and somebody there will get it for you, which is pretty normal during COVID times. But what happens if you want poached eggs and some pancakes, maple syrup and bacon as Fiona did this morning? Well, you have to order the egg from the waitress, wait till it arrives, then take your plate and go up and speak to somebody else who's going to deliver you pancakes, bacon and maple syrup. Yeah guys, it just doesn't work, and we don't know why Sandals Grand Antigua aren't operating the same system that we had last year at the Sandals Grand St. Lucia, because
during COVID times, it actually worked really well. The other thing I'm going to complain, moan about, have a bit of a whinge this morning is the staff. The staff here at the Sandals Grand Antigua are absolutely not as friendly, or there's far too many of them are not as friendly as the Sandals staff at the other resorts we've been to over the years. This morning, for example, I was told off for filming, and I think over the years I've been very respectful with my filming here on the Liv'n the Dream channel. I do my absolute best not to have other guests in the video. I will cut that out later on during editing. So to be told off by a member of staff for filming was a little bit annoying, I must admit, this morning. But I know that the guys in St. Lucia did say that the people of Antigua are certainly not as friendly as the people in St. Lucia. I really don't want to go there too much on the channel, but what I will say is there are some fantastic staff here. I don't want to take away from that. There's some great, awesome staff here at the Sandals Grand Antigua, but unfortunately there are a few that clearly get out of the wrong side of their bed every morning and probably shouldn't be working in hospitality, and there are more than a few of those here at the Sandals Grand Antigua. So that's it, rant is over. Was it a rant? Was it just a bit of a moan or a whinge? Anyway, Fiona and I are going to start the rest of our day. I have got towels out down here beside the courtyard swimming pool.
And of course, next to the courtyard swimming pool, I would find my gorgeous wife topping up on vitamin D. Well, we wondered what was so interesting to this cat at the towel rack. And patience always pays off. We worked it out in the end. Lunch today was going to be pizza at the little pizzeria next to Mario's. So just as we did for breakfast, it was time for Fiona and I to head back to the Mediterranean side of the resort. But this time we decided to go via the beach. Fiona and I love the pizzas that's served at every single one of the Sandals resorts that we've ever visited. However, in October 21 at the Sandals Grand Antigua, the wait for a pizza at lunchtime was somewhere between 60 and 90 minutes. It was absolutely ridiculous. And after a really excellent pizza finally arrived, Fiona and I headed back to our poolside loungers for an afternoon siesta before we headed to the small swim-up bar for some cocktails. And this is where I'm going to bring Monday's video to a close. By Tuesday of week 1, I'd realised that I'd started to take a lot less of video content than I normally would. Each day of our Antigua 21 adventure merging into the other. A morning lying beside the pool, followed by lunch, then more sunbathing, followed by dinner, dessert at the Paris, and maybe a nightcap at the Drunken Duck. But today, Tuesday, the 5th of October 2021, I'm simply going to concentrate on lunch because I have some new content here. And what's special about lunch today, you might ask? And to be honest, it wasn't special at all, because Fiona and I took the decision to go to the courtyard snack bar, order a sandwich to go, taking it right back to our sun loungers next to the courtyard pool. The hot buffalo chicken sandwich looked absolutely excellent, so Fiona ordered 2 of those to go. And we then headed to the bar to pick up a drink while we waited on her order, because it took more than 1 hour to deliver those 2 chicken sandwiches. We've absolutely no idea what is going wrong at Sandals during lunchtime, but the wait times are simply unacceptable. Anyway, once the chicken sandwiches arrived, they were rather good, and Fiona and I enjoyed them sitting on the sun loungers next to the pool. And that's really all I have to share with you from Tuesday, the 5th of October. However, I did try out the new GoPro Hero 9 in time-lapse mode during the sunset, which I know guys would be much better at the beach. Wednesday, the 6th of October 2021 started with a little bit of a disagreement on who left the room first. Of course, I've explained to my gorgeous wife on many occasions that she is the real star on the Living the Dream channel. But as always, in any little argument, I lost, she won, and I led the way heading towards our sun loungers next to the little courtyard pool. Anyway, let's just say that sort of was the plan until Fiona changed it. Well, Fiona is a woman and therefore she is allowed to change her mind whenever she likes. And being her dutiful lapdog, I mean husband, it's up to me to try and preempt any changed decision she makes. When we arrived at the Sun Loungers, where we had enjoyed Sunday, Monday and Tuesday, we collected our belongings because we were moving. Fiona had decided she wanted a change in scenery and she wanted to be closer to the beach. So we ended up spending the rest of the first week of our Sandals Grand Antigua adventure at the little pool next to the Caribbean beach view rooms, which was funny enough also next to the beach. And moving on to Wednesday night, we'd booked the OK Corral Mexican style restaurant for dinner. One of the reasons that we'd booked the OK Corral for tonight, Wednesday night, was because there was absolutely no entertainment on in the main courtyard. The OK Corral restaurant is an open style restaurant, so there are no windows and it overlooks the beach and the courtyard. So when there's entertainment on at the courtyard, you can't hear yourself think, never mind communicate with your beloved over dinner. Fiona, Donna Michael and I experienced this problem in October 2019 when we last visited the Sandals Grand Antigua, and with very loud music on in the courtyard that evening, it meant talking to each other over dinner was impossible. But when we arrived at the reception desk at the OK Corral restaurant, our table wasn't ready and we were directed to the piano bar to sit down, order a drink and wait for our table to become free. However, when we finally got back to the restaurant just over half an hour's wait later, we had a lovely table overlooking the beach, but I must admit the food was rather poor, which was disappointing as Mexican is one of my favourite cuisines. Of course, after we'd finished our starters and main course at the OK Corral, Fiona and I headed to the Paris Cafe for dessert, where tonight Fiona decided to go all out with one of their speciality crepes. And then we concluded our Wednesday night with a lovely drink overlooking the beach. Wednesday, the 7th of October 2021, and day 6 of our Sandals Grand Antigua 21 adventure is going to be another short one, guys, because the only new content I have to show you is the one and only time during our 21 Sandals Grand Antigua adventure where Fiona and I ventured into the sea. Most of you who follow the channel and therefore have been following Fiona and my Sandals adventures over the years will know that we're not really beach people, and that's why we prepare to get our vitamin D next to the swimming pool every day. And from the look on Fiona's face, which is painting 1,000 pictures from our one and only visit to the sea during our entire vacation, you've hopefully worked it out. The sea was extremely cold. and to be quite frank, very un-Caribbean. The water was also very murky and you really couldn't see anything, and I was therefore wondering if this had something to do with Hurricane Sam, which had passed within only a few hundred miles of Antigua a week earlier. And there was also a jellyfish problem when we visited the Sandals Grand Antigua in early October 21. So when you added together cold and murky water, more than a few guests complaining about getting stung by jellyfish, Fiona and I simply went back to our sun lounger, and that's where we would remain for the rest of our Sandals 21 vacation. I nearly forgot. On Wednesday, after multiple calls to the Sandals guest services team and 3 days, we finally got a bottle of champagne at the room. And this brings Wednesday, day 5, to a close. Cheers! Friday and day 7 for us meant a flit day. If you've been following our Antigua 21 adventure so far, you may remember that we only had this room for the first 6 nights of our 2021 vacation. And that literally meant that Fiona and I had to check out of room 512 as if we were leaving the resort, hang around for 4 hours and then check into our new room, which was 804 at the Sunset Bluff. So after a relaxing morning by the pool next to the beach, we made our way up to the Sunset Bluff rooms and our new room, which was 804. And for those of you who followed our 2019 trip to the Sandals Grand Antigua, this is where our room was during that 7 nights. The Sunset Bluff rooms are situated sort of at the back of the resort, basically on the border between the Caribbean and the Mediterranean sides. In the same way Fiona and I love the hideaway rooms at the Sandals L'Azores Grenada, we love the Sunset Bluff at the Sandals Grand Antigua because it's quiet. And this is room 804, a club level Sunset Bluff walkout room. As you can see, to access these rooms at the Sunset Bluff, you need to walk behind the room block themselves. To be honest, during the day, Fiona and I would just exit and re-enter the room through the main sliding doors at the front, which we simply left unlocked during the day. With our valuables locked in the safe, we didn't see a big issue with this. And as we enter room 804, the first thing I want to say is these rooms at the Sunset Bluff had been refurbished since we last visited in 2019. But as you can imagine, the bathroom is exactly the same place, with a modernised sink and vanity unit and a wardrobe just opposite with a new and much larger safe. The old baths had been replaced by this walk-in shower, but sadly Sandals hadn't managed to resolve the water pressure issue, and I do think that the water pressure at all of the showers at the Sandals Grand Antigua is pretty pathetic. Exiting back out of the bathroom, you enter what is a very spacious room, and of course, being a club level room, the mini bar is kept fully stocked with all of your favourite drinks, including champagne, and top shelf liquor is also provided. To us, the bed looked exactly the same as we had at the Sunset Bluff room 2 years ago at this very resort, and while the furniture seemed to have been refurbished, I'm not convinced it was new. And of course, the reason Fiona and I wanted this room was the ability to simply open those sliding doors and walk out to the pool. And that's it, guys, for Friday and day 7. Day 8 of our Sandals Grand Antigua 21 adventure, and I'm handing the video over to our awesome friends from Glasgow, Donna and Michael, because a week into our holiday, Donna and Michael are heading out to join us. And that's why you're joining them here at London Heathrow International Airport on board a Virgin Atlantic Airbus A330 as they start their 8-hour flight to Antigua. And of course, as Michael and Donna enjoy the hospitality on board Virgin Atlantic, Fiona and I are sleeping. And something that I've noticed about my GoPro Hero 9 as I edit these videos, the camera, I'm afraid, is shockingly poor in low light conditions. But back on board Virgin Atlantic, Donna and Michael are really enjoying the upper class experience. And just like Fiona a week earlier, Donna and Michael were virgins on this trip. But as our friends continued their trip westbound across the Atlantic, Fiona and I started our second week at the Sandals Grand Antigua, heading to the pool next to the beach, where we had spent the last 4 days, generally chilling out, reading more than a few books, drinking quite a few cocktails, and obviously simply relaxing. And if you're wondering why we didn't spend our first full day at the Sunset Bluff pool, I have to admit it, guys, I fell foul to Towelgate. In essence, if you weren't up before 7 a.m. getting your towels out by the loungers at the Sunset Bluff pool, you weren't getting a lounger at all that day at the Sunset Bluff. It was a right royal pain in the backside, and definitely a failure at this resort during the time that we visited in October 2019. We weren't going to let Towelgate ruin our 2021 adventure at the Sandals Grand Antigua, so we headed across the resort to the little pool next to the beach, beside the Caribbean beach view rooms. And with Donna and Michael about 2 hours out from Antigua, Fiona and I decided to take another walk back across the resort to the Mediterranean side and have lunch at Barefoot on the Beach. On both our trips to Antigua, I've sat on the other side of the aircraft, so it was great for Michael to be sitting on the right-hand side of the aircraft on this approach into VC Bird International, capturing this incredible video on his iPhone. And that's it! Donna and Michael had arrived in Antigua, and the foursome would soon be reunited for a fun-filled week at the Sandals Grand Antigua. Jumping forward to Tuesday and day 11, I'm only going to cover one thing today, and that, of course, is the Sandals returning guest dinner on Tuesday evening. As you all know, I hate these events, and the only reason we went is because Fiona and I were being awarded our free week, which is, of course, the only reason we went to the returning guest dinner at the Sandals Grand St. Lucian last year when Donna and Michael were awarded their free week. But I'm going to be brutally honest. In our opinion, the food at the returning guest dinner has always been mass-produced rubbish, and within minutes of arriving, you're going to be asking yourself, is this nearly over? Can I go back to the Drunken Duck and get some decent food? But sadly not, guys, because then you're going to be subjected to an hour listening to the Sandals on-site management team praising themselves and their colleagues in some weird weekly self-gratification routine. Thursday and day 12 of our Antigua 21 adventure was the 13th of October, and unlucky for some, Fiona, Donna, Michael and I took the decision to leave the resort for a few hours and head into St. John's, the capital city of Antigua, so we booked a taxi from the Sandals front desk and donned our masks to board the minibus for the 10 to 15 minute drive into St. John's. And yes guys, unlike our minibus ride from the airport to the resort, I did manage to call shotgun and grab the front passenger seat in a bid to get you footage of this short journey into St. John's. I should state now that when we visited Antigua during the first 2 weeks of October in 2021, mask wearing was compulsory by law in all taxis. We were reliably informed that the fine for not complying with this mask wearing regulation was a $500 fine. And thank goodness I never did find out if the fine was $500 US or 500 East Caribbean dollars. And yes guys, St John's even has a KFC, which I always say is my guilty pleasure. But let's get back to the short drive from Sandals into St John's. As you can see, the roads are absolutely terrible. Antigua was under British rule from 1660 to 1981. And to be honest, I'm not sure which century they were last resurfaced. But given how bad they are, I don't think these roads have been touched since the British left in 1981. But as you can see, we're now entering St John's, with its population of 51,200 from the 2011 census. And that therefore represents just over half the population of the island of Antigua, which is 98,000. And as we approach what I guess is the city centre, you can see the roads get no better. The potholes are as large as a lunar crater, and the storm drains at the side of the roads all seem to be breaking up, making the situation even worse. The taxi dropped Fiona, Donna, Michael and I at the duty-free zone, which is right next to the port of St John's. And you guessed it guys, that is where the cruise liners come in. And yes guys, well spotted, we are still wearing our face masks. For some ridiculous reason, the Antiguan authorities required all public, even outdoors, to wear masks. I have no problem with mandatory mask wearing on public transport, in public buildings, but outdoors, I seriously don't think there is any scientific evidence that mask wearing outdoors makes the potential of catching COVID any less. And to be honest guys, if we'd known that mask wearing was compulsory even outdoors, I'm not sure we would have travelled in to St John's today. But our trip into St John's got worse when the girls went off clothes shopping and Michael and I went looking for a beer. Michael and I gone back to the pub where we drank Woodadley 2 years ago, only to find it was closed due to COVID. However, when we found a pub and paid for the 2 beers, we were told we had to leave the premises. It was therefore illegal for us to drink beer in a pub. So we found this raised platform, walked up the steps, sat down to drink our beer, before going for a walk to see if St John's had anything better to show us. Michael did find 4 emaciated dogs sleeping under a parked car, which just made the visit to this depressing town even worse. If we could have found the girls, I think we would have called the taxi to come back and get us. So with Donna and Fiona off buying dresses, there was little else Michael and I could do but go back to that pub, get 2 more beers, and sit on that raised platform, enjoying the view over St John's. Thursday, the 14th of October 2021, and day 13 of our Antigua 21 adventure is all about a walk on the beach. Because straight after breakfast, Fiona and I had decided to walk to both ends of the beach as far as we could walk in both directions from the Sandals Grand Antigua. So we initially turned left, heading in the direction of St John's, the capital city of Antigua. But if you'd watched yesterday's visit and our trip into St John's, you would see it is far from a city. Anyway, back to Fiona's and my walk on the beach. The Sandals Pier that you saw a few seconds ago is in fact the boundary line of the resort heading in this direction. So the properties and the beach club you're going to see from now on are nothing to do with the Sandals Resort. And remember, as I've explained in previous videos, all of the beaches on Antigua are public beaches, 365 in total. I've told the story of this yacht wreck when we last visited the Sandals Grand Antigua back in 2019. The story goes a number of years ago that drug runners using this yacht were being chased by the authorities. The drug runners headed for land and beached the yacht, and here it remains to this day. The one big thing that we noticed on the second trip to Antigua 2 years after our first is how much less beach there is. I'll come back to this a little bit later on in the video when we're walking back past this wrecked yacht, but without a doubt sea levels are definitely rising, and in this part of Antigua it's definitely taking over the land. And this is as far as Fiona and I could walk on the beach in this direction. So there was little else that Fiona and I could do but turn round and head in the opposite direction. Okay, I want you to take a second and familiarise yourself how close the sea is to this yacht wreck, because in a minute I'm going to take you back to October 2019. Okay, here is Fiona and I 2 years younger when we last visited the Sandals Grand Antigua in October 2019. And hopefully you can appreciate the sea level from 2 years ago, because jumping back to October 2021, Fiona and I did wonder if this was the telltale signs of global warming. And if you stick with this video, you will see some other examples a little bit later on, when we walk past the abandoned resort on the other side of the Sandals Grand Antigua. And here we are approaching the Sandals Pier from the other side. And yes guys, when we cross this pier, we're back on the Sandals Resort. As I've said many times throughout our Antigua 21 adventure series, the beach here at the Grand Antigua is beautiful. However, when we visited in October 2021, we felt that the water was a lot colder than it had been previously, and certainly very un-Caribbean. Neither Fiona and I were sure if this was the aftermath of Hurricane Sam, which passed within a few hundred miles of Antigua a week earlier. And the other big issue in 2021 was there seemed to be an awful lot of jellyfish, and a number of guests that we met had complained about being stung. But getting back to our morning walk on the beach, Fiona and I have now left the Sandals Grand Antigua Resort in the other direction, where we're now approaching the abandoned resort that I talked about earlier. I've absolutely no idea when this resort closed, but it reminded me of an old film from my childhood called Logan's Run, because years after the abandonment, the wilderness has started to take over. Fiona and I did have a chuckle to ourselves, wondering if Sandals could extend the Grand Antigua by taking over this old abandoned resort. They currently have the Caribbean side and the Mediterranean side, so Fiona and I tried to come up with names for this new fictitious Sandals extension that right now only lived in our heads. If you're interested in joining in, leave your ideas in the comments below. So as we continue our walk, you will hopefully be able to see again the sign of rising waters. I'm not going to get into the debate of global warming on the channel, but what I do want to say is the rising sea is quite worrying. And as we reach the end of this old resort, and what for us was going to be the end of our walk in this direction, the beach became more untidy with remnants of this old abandoned resort. And it makes me wonder why the Antiguan authorities couldn't compel the owners of this old resort to clear up their mess. And that was as far as Fiona and I could go in that direction. So it was time to do a 180 and head back to the Sandals Grand Antigua for a well-earned drink. As we arrived back at the resort, we did look for Donna and Michael. We did manage to find Donna's hat lying on a sun lounger, but no sign of the couple, and later on we found that they'd gone for their own walk on the beach. You joined Fiona, Donna Michael and I on Friday night, the last night of our Sandals 21 adventure. In this episode, I'm covering our kimonos experience only, because we all have enjoyed kimonos at the other Sandals resorts we visited over the years, but we had yet to try kimonos here at the Grand Antigua. And again, I'm going to apologise for the quality of this video. My GoPro Hero 9 is not performing very well in low light conditions. However, we headed out of the lobby on the Caribbean side of the Sandals Grand Antigua resort for the 2-minute walk to kimonos, and of course soy is in the same block. And most of you watching this will probably already be aware that kimonos is the hibachi, or is it teppanyaki, Japanese style restaurant on site at the majority of Sandals resorts here in the Caribbean. Checking in at kimonos was a little bit chaotic, but that was becoming a theme during our October 21 vacation at the Sandals Grand Antigua. However, we didn't have to wait very long before being escorted to our dining room. And to Fiona and I, the kimonos here at the Sandals Grand Antigua reminded us very much of the kimonos restaurant at the Sandals Le Toc in St. Lucia. A series of small dining rooms rather than one large restaurant, which can get rather noisy. So for us, this was going to be a thumbs up for kimonos at the Grand Antigua. Tonight, there was only going to be 6 of us around this dining table. Fiona, Donna Michael, myself and another couple from England. But we soon realised there was going to be none of the theatrics that we would normally get at kimonos at the other Sandals resorts we'd visited over the year. The chef was without a doubt an excellent hibachi chef, and his food tasted absolutely awesome. But kimonos without egg throwing, rice volcanoes exploding in a fireball just didn't seem like kimonos at all. The chef prepared the usual chicken, steak, and tonight's seafood option was maki-maki. And yes guys, it all tasted really good, leaving us wondering if the lack of theatrics was just another sign of the Sandals Grand Antigua just not living up to other Sandals resorts that we've visited over the last 8 years. As I said earlier, the food was excellent, and based on the quantities we were served, you were never going to go hungry after a night at kimonos at the Sandals Grand Antigua. And after dinner at all of the restaurants that we've enjoyed here at the Sandals Grand Antigua, we didn't go for dessert, because after kimonos, Fiona, Donna, Michael and I headed to the Paris Cafe for coffee and dessert. Yep, I guess all good things must come to an end, and for our Antigua 21 adventure, it was Saturday the 16th of October 2021. The packing began in earnest after breakfast, and after a quick call to reception, I managed to get a late checkout at 1 p.m, which was absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Sandals. Our flight wasn't departing until just before 6 p.m, so with our allotted pickup time from the resort scheduled for 3 p.m, this meant Fiona and I had plenty of time to relax and get some last vitamin D before checking out. Of course, we did this at the Sunset Bluff pool next to our room. But sadly, 1 p.m. came around far too fast, so we get showered and cleaned up because we'll be heading to meet Donna and Michael for lunch before leaving the resort at 3 p.m. We basically sat at the Caribbean Courtyard snack bar enjoying sandwiches, beer and wine. And I'm not sure if you can pick it up on the little GoPro, but it is absolutely bucketing it down outside. And of course, after the rain came the sunshine. But even better, Fiona and Donna went to the bar to pick up more drinks. And after lunch came the waiting. And it's always at this point, when you're waiting to be picked up by the bus, that we wished Star Trek teleportation had actually been invented, allowing us to be magically beamed up or beamed across the Atlantic back to the UK with minimal wait and minimal fuss. Donna and Fiona did manage to get in a game of pool, but this did little for our moods while we waited to be picked up. I think that on top of our Virgin Atlantic service back to London Heathrow this evening, there might also have been 2 BAs leaving at roughly the same time for London Gatwick, because sandals were an absolute chaos here in the Caribbean lobby. They seemed completely incapable of getting bags from our rooms down to the lobby. And I think Donna and Michael's bags took something like 4 or 5 hours to travel the 100 yards from their room to this lobby. The passengers on the BA service to London tonight were first to head to the airport, and with minibus after minibus shuttling passengers on the 15-minute journey between the Sandals Grand Antigua and VC Bird International, Fiona and I were soon called along with another couple because Donna and Michael were in about 3 buses before us. And as you can see, the skies opened again because another thunderstorm was making its way through. And this is something I do want to say, because the weather during our October 21 adventure at the Sandals Grand Antigua was actually very good. Our first week, which came a week after Hurricane Sam passed within 200 miles of Antigua, was simply wall-to-wall sunshine. And while the weather during our second week was a little more mixed, we have come to expect thunderstorms in the Caribbean. However, none of them caused us to lose any days of our vacation during that second week at the Sandals Grand Antigua. And as you'll see in a minute as we arrive at VC Bird Airport, I do get a little soaked retrieving our bags from the back of the minivan. Right, I'm probably going to go on a little bit of a rant again, because unlike the fantastic arrival process here at Antigua, our departure process can only be described as a chaotic, disorganised mess. Yes, our NHS double vaccination certificates had to be checked manually, along with our UK passenger locator forms, which of course had already been approved online 48 hours earlier. But there was no luggage conveyor belt system that seemed to be working here at VC Bird, and the lines for check-in were incredibly long, and it was sort of embarrassing having to push past these passengers in the economy line, heading for the much shorter upper class check-in line. But to be honest guys, the chaos was simply so bad that check-in seemed to take forever. Neither Fiona nor I or the other passengers seemed to have any idea why the Virgin Atlantic check-in process was so bad in Antigua this afternoon. Even when we finally were called to the check-in counter, things didn't seem to get any faster. And just in case you're wondering, the guys in the high-vis vests with the little trolleys were transporting everyone's cases by hand from the check-in counters to another security screening line. But Fiona and I did manage to get through the check-in process, and we were heading for the escalators and the immigration process and security, which, to be quite honest guys, was no better. Long lines, long waits, and very frustrating indeed. But once through security, we met up with Donna and Michael, who were roughly 15 minutes ahead of us. And on the positive side, we did manage to walk straight past Colombian Emeralds en route to the business class lounge. If you watched our Antigua 2019 video series, you will recognise this business class lounge, because all of the British Airways customers and the Virgin Atlantic customers were using the same lounge. And that, guys, presented a little bit of a challenge, because there simply weren't enough seats. And as you will see in a second, the outside terrace area had also been closed. The staff blamed the weather, but quite frankly, I wasn't too sure. And the biggest problem of this lounge wasn't really the lounge itself, but the other passengers, because far too many were blocking seats by just dumping their hand luggage on them, which compounded the problem of the lack of seating. But we did manage to find 3 seats together, which meant I had the opportunity to cuddle my wife while drinking really lovely cold beer and watching the aircraft outside the window. What more can you ask for? And about 45 minutes before our departure time, we were called to board the aircraft. And on tonight's Virgin Atlantic service between Antigua and London Heathrow, we would be flying on board an Airbus A330-300. Now, I had a stroke of luck when requesting our seats on this journey back across to the UK. We had been due to fly tonight on board a Boeing 787-9 Dreamliner, the same aircraft type that Fiona and I flew over on 2 weeks earlier. There had been an aircraft change made several weeks earlier, and I just so happened to be checking the Virgin Atlantic seat map one afternoon about 4 weeks ago when I noticed Virgin had wiped out their entire seat reservations for this flight back to London Heathrow this evening. So I did what you would have expected me to do, and that was to book seats 1A and 2A. I then contacted Donna and Michael on FaceTime, and they reserved seats 3A and 4A right next to us. And just like on a trip out to Antigua 2 weeks earlier, it was fantastic to be able to turn left. And as you can see, the seating configuration in upper class on board the Airbus is exactly the same as the seats we had on the way out on the Boeing Dreamliner. And the one thing that I really do like about this reverse herringbone style 3 abreast seating is the fact that every seat has direct aisle access. And while I do still prefer the British Airways yin-yang style in Club World, which I know British Airways are now phasing out in favour of their new Club World suites, the Virgin Atlantic upper class configuration is just okay. But on the positive side, we did get a pre-departure glass of champagne, setting us up for this near 8-hour flight northeast back across the Atlantic. And with this pretty cheesy safety video, it was time to finally push back. And as we taxied out to the runway here in Antigua, the skies had opened again. Another thunderstorm had come through with an absolute dumping of rain. Now, moving on to the subject of British Airways, I couldn't find out if it was normal or not on a Saturday, but there seemed to be 2 BA 777-200 ERs en route back to London Gatwick tonight from Antigua. I think one had arrived on a shuttle service from St Kitts and the other from Grenada, but it did seem odd that there were 2 BAs back to London Gatwick tonight. And as we rotated off the runway at Antigua, the second BA 777 had pushed back and was ready to make its taxi out to the runway as we had done 10 minutes earlier. And as you will see, departing Antigua in an easterly direction, you're soon over the Atlantic Ocean. And you guessed it guys, with the skies getting darker, there was going to be very little to show you outside the window on our journey back to the UK tonight. And before you ask guys, I really can't remember what tonight's dinner was. From memory it was okay, and yes guys, I do just mean okay. Because when it comes to airline food, I'm going to give it to British Airways over Virgin. We'd be arriving at London Heathrow Airport on runway 27 right at just around 6:30 in the morning. In the middle of October, that meant it was still going to be dark, and yep, that meant filming outside the window was going to be nearly impossible, especially with my brand new GoPro Hero 9 performing so badly in low light conditions. But a twist of surprise, Virgin Atlantic were serving a full English breakfast in upper class this morning, including baked beans. However, I don't think they were Heinz guys. The breakfast was pretty dry, and despite the possibility of being exciting, it wasn't really. Anyway, reverting to my iPhone 12 for these shots outside the window in the dark, the lights of London signified we were nearly home. Leaving our aircraft at London Heathrow Terminal 3 this morning, I think we were all a little bit apprehensive arriving in the United Kingdom. We of course had heard all of the horror stories on the BBC about horrendous long queuing and waits to get through immigration. It was therefore a very pleasant surprise, because the automatic passport gates were all open and we were in the baggage hall in only a matter of a few minutes. This afternoon we all had a connecting flight on board British Airways, which meant transiting across to Terminal 5, and that meant using the free Heathrow Express train service between Terminals 2, 3 and Terminal 5. And when we would arrive in Terminal 5, we would be heading straight to the lounge, which had been booked and paid for prior to our trip to Antigua. And it's at that lounge that'll be bringing this video and the entire Antigua 21 adventure to a close. So I hope you've enjoyed this video series, following Fiona and I, and then Donna and Michael a week later, enjoying the ups and downs of the Sandals Grand Antigua. Thanks for watching. Right guys, thank you very much for watching our Antigua 21 adventure here on Living the Dream. Again, I do want to apologise, sorry, I've just been joined by Bob the cat here. I do want to apologise again for the quality of this video. I appreciate that it's not been as good as some of my previous videos, but as I said at the start of this video, Fiona and I really just wanted to try and relax in Antigua in October 2021, and that is exactly what we did. And I do apologise that it simply meant I didn't have a lot of really great video content to share with you. So what's coming up on the channel next? I do want to try and edit a video looking at the Sandals Grand St. Lucia versus the Sandals Grand Antigua. I think you all know guys who's going to win that showdown, but I will try and produce that either later on this year or maybe early in 2022. Now, coming back to 2022, Fiona, Donna Michael and I are looking at what to do next summer. We have a free week to use at Sandals. We're currently negotiating with Sandals the possibility of doing 2 weeks at the Sandals Montego Bay in Jamaica next July. I'll obviously bring you some news of that once we have it finalised. Next October, we're not going to do sandals. I did say that we weren't that happy with sandals this year, and we would potentially not be going to sandals. What I'm looking to do, or what Michael and I are looking to try and do right now, is grab a couple of British Airways Club World returns using Avios between London and Cancun in Mexico next October. And once we have the flights booked, we'll then try and grab an adults only all-inclusive resort, which of course we will bring to you on the channel when we finally go there in, well, that'll be just over 11 and a half months time. Right, I'm going to stop waffling on and bring this video to a close. Again, thank you so much for watching our Antigua 21 adventure. I'm sorry again that it wasn't up to my usual standard, but I hope you enjoyed it anyway. Thanks again.